This American salvage ship, while salvaging in the Pacific, unexpectedly discovered Soviet nuclear warheads from World War II at the bottom of the sea. It was a highly delicate operation, and they were about to face a massive storm in the area. Lieutenant Wall, in charge of the mission, had to expedite the process. As Wall pushed the lever to control the submarine, radar suddenly detected intense movement from the seabed. Subsequently, the seafloor began to crack and debris inadvertently hit the submarine, dragging it and the nuclear warhead into the abyss. Captain Oldwhite couldn't establish contact with Wall and was planning to seek support from the Coast Guard. Suddenly, due to the impact, the nuclear warhead exploded. The scene shifted to the Earthquake Intelligence Bureau, where Director Jin received an urgent report indicating seismic signals in the Western Pacific region, escalating from an initial magnitude of 6 to the current 8, showing no signs of stopping and potentially reaching a record-breaking 9.5. The Department of Homeland Security and the Federal Emergency Management Agency had initiated urgent evacuations. After an investigation, they discovered that the disaster was not caused by an earthquake, but by the previously detonated nuclear warhead on the seabed. The chain reaction triggered by the explosion had severely damaged the plate boundary between the Philippines and Australia. If this continued, the mantle would be lifted, submerging the entire world in seawater. As the news broke, strategic forces experienced violent tremors. Outside, fires caused by the earthquake had engulfed coastal cities. Once proud skyscrapers were now lethal weapons, and the entire city crumbled like the apocalypse, with people desperately trying to escape. Assistant Peter, through data analysis, learned of intense activity on the western edge of the Pacific Plate. Looking down from an altitude of 10,000 meters, the entire sea was a fiery red. As the mantle continued to rise, boiling seawater formed colossal waves, crashing towards Japan. According to Peter's calculations, 72 hours later, the Pacific Plate on the east side will undergo a similar structural transformation. At that time, the entire west coast of the United States, including Central America, will experience a similar disaster. As the tsunami continues inland, the resulting catastrophe will be fundamentally unbearable for humanity. This information comes to Jin from a call with her daughter Sophie, who explains that due to earthquakes destroying the ground, all flights had to emergency land at another airport. After consoling her daughter, Jin reminds her to find survival supplies after landing. Staff intervenes when they discover this and forces the mother-daughter duo to interrupt their call. Meanwhile, the entire city has fallen into complete paralysis. Even with the efforts of the fire department and rescue teams, the situation remains dire, and the entire country is engulfed in despair. Jin receives a call from the White House, urging her to find her brother, Anderson, within 3 days. Anderson was once involved in a top-secret project called Star Wars, but after dismissal for unknown reasons, he vanished from the world. Now, not even Jin knows his whereabouts. With a glimmer of hope, Jin leaves a voicemail for Anderson, hoping he sees the message and comes to find her soon. Anderson receives the message and appears before Jin. On the other side, Sophie's plane experiences severe turbulence during landing, crashing and skidding. For hundreds of meters before coming to a stop, just as they breathe a sigh of relief, the plane shakes again. Flight attendants quickly reassure passengers and instruct them to evacuate to the rear of the plane. However, due to weight imbalances and seismic vibrations, the metal connection at the front of the plane breaks, causing the cockpit and pilot to plunge into the abyss. A nuclear bomb detonated in the deep sea triggers a super earthquake, leading to a world-engulfing tsunami. The only solution envisioned by an American Star Wars program weapons expert is to use laser weapons to slow down the movement of tectonic plates until they stop. This appears to be a wildly ambitious plan that would expose America's secret research on lasers, ion beams, and other weapons to the world. At this moment, Anderson has no other option. With the communication network completely paralyzed, they quickly make their way outside, intending to drive to the National Security Council to find a person named Diane. Once they successfully arrive, they plan to use the communication devices there to establish contact with the general at the White House and initiate the Star Wars plan. All they need to do next is identify the target they intend to attack on the Earth model and input the coordinates for precise targeting. Peter calculates and suggests targeting the most northern point in the Alaska Bay. When Peter presses the button, a pink laser beam instantly shoots out and accurately hits the target. However, Peter soon realizes something is wrong. One of the 3 laser beams malfunctioned, resulting in only 2 successful hits. Attempts to rectify the situation fail due to the overload of the launching device, and the plan ultimately falls short due to insufficient energy, failing to stop the impending disaster. Anderson makes a quick decision, urging the US government to intensify evacuation efforts before the next attack and reduce casualties. Crystal suggests adjusting the angle and using auxiliary laser weapons for correction, but before they can continue their attempts, the entire building experiences another intense earthquake. The group hastily evacuates outside, fortunate to find a military base not far away that they can utilize. However, Diane, as a staff member, must stay at her post, leaving Crystal and the others to proceed alone. As they drive into the jungle, a large tree blocks their path, forcing them to abandon the vehicle and continue on foot. After several hours, they finally reach the military base. Anderson presents the work permit given to him by Diane to successfully prove their identities, and soldiers escort them to the computer room to log back into the Star Wars system. Peter discovers changes in the region of oceanic basalt, and the terrain here is even more vulnerable. The laser weapon could more easily cause the uplift of the East Pacific geofracture, potentially preventing the disaster as new crust forms with rising magma. However, when Peter inputs the coordinates, the system issues an alarm. The US had never anticipated such a situation, and the weapons they created are not allowed to be launched domestically. Fortunately, Peter, being resourceful, manages to deceive the satellites by resetting a parameter, successfully launching the laser weapon. With the surrounding tremors finally ceasing, Anderson believes that the mission is accomplished. However, Peter discovers after examining the data that the energy from the recent attack is still insufficient to halt the plate's movement. Moreover, due to consecutive assaults, the temperature of the rock layers keeps rising, intensifying the earthquakes. On the other side, Sophie's father, Colonel Mike, and his team locate the crash site of the plane. Unfortunately, Sophie had left just minutes earlier to search for supplies. Upon hearing the news, Mike instructs his subordinates to stay behind and assist with treating the injured, then prepares to follow Sophie's path. Just as they start to move, another disaster unfolds, a scene of unimaginable horror. The Earth's surface cracks open, and magma that had been sealed for thousands of years erupts violently. Accompanied by powerful earthquakes, skyscrapers collapse into ruins. The laser weapons created by humans prove inadequate to counteract the movement of continental plates. In their moment of despair, Crystal suddenly has an idea. There are some oil drilling platforms on the Pacific Ocean surface. They can ignite them, and through unloading gas pressure, indirectly enhance the energy of the laser weapons to counterbalance the plate's movement. However, the difficulty lies in igniting multiple drilling platforms simultaneously and coordinating with the laser weapons. To gain approval for the plan, they need permission from the Coastal Control Center. To achieve this, they must find a way to contact the center. Meanwhile, Mike finally finds Susan in a corner, unaware that his military vehicle has become humanity's last hope for salvation. So, it turns out that Jin and the others needed to rely on the satellite communication device in Mike's vehicle to successfully contact the Coastal Control Center. When Sophie answered the phone and recognized Crystal's voice, she was incredibly excited. Mike quickly learned the entire situation from Crystal and assisted in sending the signal to the Coastal Control Center. Crystal, still concerned, decided to go to the scene herself to supervise. To ensure accuracy, all parameters had to be manually adjusted. Peter sat at the computer, starting the venting process for the wells. The movement of the tectonic plate did slow down, but unexpectedly, the situation quickly took a turn for the worse. Data showed that seismic activity not only didn't decrease but became even more active and abnormal. A tsunami soon struck Sophie's location, but luckily, the tank provided protection, saving both of them. However, when Sophie climbed out again, she found herself disoriented, with the surrounding buildings submerged. Meanwhile, Crystal continued her last attempt. She instructed Peter to maximize the pump pressure and add liquid oxygen. 1 second later, an explosion occurred prematurely in the drilling platform, creating a shock that pushed the plate into a deviated orbit. This meant that instead of resolving the crisis, they accelerated the world's destruction. Crystal, refusing to accept reality, decided to send explosives into the middle of the well for another attempt. As long as they placed the explosives deep enough, it wouldn't pose a threat to humanity and could push volcanic magma to the surface, allowing it to cool. Once everything was ready, Rick controlled the mechanism to send the explosives deep into the ground. Unexpectedly, halfway through the descent, the weight became too much, causing the rear engine to malfunction. Someone had to go and retrieve the explosives. Hearing this, Crystal, prepared for sacrifice, donned a protective suit and descended to the hatch containing the explosives. Workers connected 2 pressure chambers, using gravity to continue the descent with the explosives. Due to severe oxygen deficiency, Jin fell into a daze and eventually passed out. However, she recalled her daughter in the midst of the disaster, used her last bit of strength to turn a switch, and the explosives finally reached their destination. The explosion marked the end of the crisis. Jin's pressure chamber was pulled back to the surface. After several days of rescue efforts, she finally regained consciousness.